welcome to the MadTrio podcast. This week we have the California Pariah, Jonathan Charney, James, the Fat Man Stevens,
and the old guys here.
Hello,
Rob. Like I said last week, he's the Murtaugh to our Riggs.
Okay. So
It's from Lethal Weapon. Murtaugh always says I'm getting too old for this shit.
Oh, he's right.
That's kind of his shtick.
He's right. We do get to a point where it's getting too old for this.
So I wanted to ask Ryan. I know Ryan became a little bit of a winophile or whatever it is, and I saw this replacement air. It looks like a can of what is it? The canned air stuff. But this is supposed to be for wine. So you put
Duster?
it. Yeah, it looks like a can of Duster, but it's what you do is you put the little nozzle in the bottle of wine, hit the button, blow it in there a bit, and then you put the stopper in it. So basically what it does...
So you're trying to make it a sparkling wine?
No, basically what it does is it stops it from oxidizing and it stops the wine from going bad.
Oh. Okay.
And I was thinking about buying the bottle of vermouth, but the problem is because it's fortified wine and I don't see me using it that much. I was afraid of it going bad on me. So I want to ask him, how long has he managed to preserve a bottle of wine? Is it 6 months, a year? Because if it's that...
You mean an open bottle of wine?
Well, yeah, with that dust off, that wine saver stuff. How long has he saved it for? Because I want to buy a bottle of the sweet vermouth. The problem is it may go rancid by the time I finish.
So wouldn't sweet vermouth be considered a white wine?
Doesn't that go bad, though? Because vermouth
not
does
like
go...
red.
Because how long do you think it takes? Because vermouth does go bad.
Well, yeah, but I know people that uncork a white bottle of wine, take a glass, put the cork back in it, stick it in the refrigerator, and it's good for quite a while.
I'll have to do some more research on it because it was...
Red wine doesn't do that. Red wine, correct. You can have it for about 5 days, depending on the bottle, before it starts going vinegar.
Oh, really? That fast?
Yeah, it doesn't last hardly at all.
No, yeah, it goes bad fast.
Yeah, it's one of those things. You open a bottle of red wine, you need to finish it.
So
a lot of people do just that.
Just Googling it real quick. Once you open your bottle of vermouth, it needs to be stored in the refrigerator. It'll stay in good shape for about a month, and then passable shape for about 2 months after that. So I'll have to ask Ryan because there's a couple of things I'm considering for my next purchase. There's a bottle of Appleton Estate 12-year Jamaican rum for $65, $70 that I've been eyeing. Huh. It's supposed to be amazing from the reviews I've read. So that's I'm on the bubble of what to get. The question for me is how long could I save that bottle of sweet vermouth? And I can't justify a purchase of something I've had 3 drinks in the last 6 months. And I had it this weekend, so I don't drink enough.
Yeah. No, I know. There's a lot of stuff that, it's no different than foods, if you just think about it. I mean, you put some food in the refrigerator, and it's only going to last so long anyway, so.
Yeah, and unless you freeze it, then you get the whole freezer dry thing, the freezer burn, too. Yeah,
well, that's why I like vacuum packing everything, because get rid of that oxygen in it, and it'll last longer in the freezer.
Yeah.
So I've been watching clips of, complete subject change, of Babylon 5. And this is to sound weird, but I never, because I'll send James and Ryan clips of Babylon 5, the original.
The original.
And I didn't know Will Robinson was in Babylon 5. He played Lanier. He was one of, I don't remember the race. The race that had that really weird, bone in the back?
When you say Will Robinson, are you talking
from the original 60s show?
60s, yes.
Money, William... I don't remember his name.
Mooney? Really? Mooney. Okay.
I don't remember the... You're going to make me Google it.
Unfortunately, I can't remember his name.
But he was in it, which I didn't realize. And he was talking about, getting the show and what happened in this clip I saw. Because once I saw it was him, I'm like, okay, now I really want to know more about it. So it was just super interesting to find a guy who was an old school actor from the 60s days to that. It was Bill Mooney, Mumy. So Charles William, I don't know how you
Money.
say it.
I think he pronounced it money.
So he was in it. So this is let's show the old guy. This is him.
Would have never figured that one out.
And it's funny too, because being as old as it show as it is, still discovering things after watching clips and episodes like, whoa, you know. And it's still I think that's going to be. I don't know if you guys have watched. It's actually 66 according to Wikipedia. I think that'll go down as one of the most underrated sci-fi shows in history.
Underrated?
Underrated.
It's pretty popular at the time.
Yeah, but the thing I think that counts on science fiction is the longevity of it, and I think it's kind of obscure now. Like if you talk to people, it's like, oh, what's a great sci-fi show? Oh, they'll say the new Battlestar Galactica. They'll say Stargate, Star Trek. But Babylon 5 seems to be in this really weird pattern where people don't remember it.
So the joke always was made that they copied with the Cylon red eyes going back and forth. They copied Knight Rider. Copied Kit from Knight Rider. So it was always a joke about it. And their sets always seemed to be a series of it. Did you see how cheesy that set was in the last episode? Yeah.
For what, Babylon 5?
Babylon 5, yeah.
It does have kind of this 90s vibe to it. There was I don't know if I forwarded it. No, I didn't. There's a section. It actually reminds me of American Gladiators. There's a section. It's like of 6x6 squares on a grid pattern, and the 6x6, the squares themselves are lighted up, and there's this giant row of them, and it's like something at like a 45-degree angle, then a 90 on there, and it's this whole way down. And so there was a bunch of cheesy sets, but the one thing, and I actually think the sets have aged fairly well because it's the story you're paying attention to generally. It's not as bad. Like if you watch like the 1960s version of Lost in Space, not only was the writing campy, but the sets were campy. I think you can have good writing and campy sets because let's be honest, let's look at not Babylon 5. Let's look at, was it Star Trek, the space station one, Deep Space Nine. Some of those sets were a little hokey. Off the space station for the first couple of episodes, they were borrowing next gen sets and they were seeing kind of their age.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I think most of the sets, if you look at them from today's perspective, were pretty crappy. I mean, look at, that was the reason why I couldn't get into the original Star Trek growing up, is because I looked at the sets and I'm like, are you kidding me? I just couldn't get into it because, by comparison of what we had in the 80s and 90s, it was already campy for that time.
So, okay, so seeing the original sets at the original time in the 60s.
For what show?
As a kid.
Lost in Space?
No,
Star Trek.
Star Trek. Oh, okay, yeah.
It looked pretty cool, being honest. I mean, It was a Friday night show for me most of the time in high school.
Single,
which
no
pissed
dates.
me off because it was away games, band games and stuff, and so we were always gone at the time that Star Trek was on, so I had to miss a lot of it.
But you always,
reruns were kind of tough back then.
You always had Doctor Who.
Always had Doctor Who. Always did. Interesting enough, I watched. I don't know if you guys are a Stargate fan. I've always been a fan of all the Stargate.
I was actually a fan of Stargate.
Yeah,
I actually was.
So I was. What impressed me is that I sat down to watch the 1994 version of Stargate,
the movie.
The movie. And I had completely forgotten that one of my favorite actors,
Kurt Russell,
James Spader.
He played James the Doctor,
Spader.
Right? He plays, Dr. Jackson. I completely forgot that he played, because I watched the Blacklist, and I love the Blacklist because of James Spader.
I like Blacklist. Yeah, Spader
is so good, and I had completely forgotten that he was in that movie, and it was like, boy, talking about looking. That's 30 years ago, though, so I'll give him props for that. But he had long hair, and he was the heartthrob at the time.
The MacGyver ripoff.
You forget how old he is, actually.
Yeah.
However, the bad guy in that movie, I could have done without seeing at least one of his movies. Crying Game, because he played the bad guy on there. Was it Raw? He was in the movie Crying Game.
Yeah, well,
Good movie up until the end.
there's a movie that we could have probably done without, right?
Honestly,
I
it wasn't.
could've done
It
without.
wasn't a bad movie. It just wasn't a movie that, like, at the end of it, like, it's like, okay, I know this is a guy.
Lost Highway was the only one that I could think of worse that came out about the same time.
By the way, this is a spoiler alert for what, a 40-year-old movie. So
Old enough to have
yeah. So like the last scene was the one I wasn't expecting. It's kind of like Eastern Promises and the last scene about that, except the fact there's a giant schwanz on the screen, and you're just like, I seriously could have done without that. But other than that, it actually wasn't a bad movie.
Yeah, the problem is that one scene. Yeah, the Crying Game. That one whole scene ruined the whole movie.
This is true because that's the last thing you see. It was bad. That was what do they call the coup d'etat?
Yeah, that ruined it.
Coup de grace.
So coup de grace.
Close
so
enough.
we've hit a milestone in the country. Wait a minute. Let me see. Let me make sure something because it doesn't sound right. Not the country, in the world. The world hit a milestone today. You know what that was?
What?
1 million people dead from coronavirus.
Wow.
So what is, and I haven't looked this up, do you know how many people die from the flu a year? Is there reporting on?
Yeah, I Googled that, baby, because I'm sure it's there. The seasonal flu kills a certain percentage of people every year, but
because the other thing, I was listening to my favorite radio show on the way home today, and they said there's like a 5% raise of suicides, specifically children, and like according to them, it's been a lot of children and people who lose everything. And they say total at a U.S. is like, and he could have been pulling this, out of thin air, but it's like 0.01% flu death. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do what we're doing. I'm just saying, comparisons to me are interesting.
36,000 people a year die in the United States alone from the seasonal flu. That's just regular old day, every day.
And that's United States or worldwide?
That's just United States.
Okay. A year.
Yeah, 36,000. So.
Because was it 400? No, there's been 7 million cases, and hasn't there only been 200,000 deaths?
No.
Well, the story I was reading is just talking about the worldwide. I don't know let me see if it's got any statistics for just the United States.
So while he's looking that up, I got a random fact for you. Fancy ketchup, the term is actually better than regular ketchup.
What?
Yeah, apparently fancy ketchup is actually a better ketchup than regular ketchup.
What is fancy ketchup?
Yeah, what is fancy ketchup?
I don't know. That's all it said was that, today I learned that fancy ketchup is a better ketchup than regular ketchup. I mean, look it up. I was just trying to kill time and stop dead air, but.
So 200,000 people, let's see, on September 22nd, the number hit 200,000 in the United States. So that's a huge difference and that's not even a year because it started started counting it in March. So here you have, if 200,000 people have died, so in 7 months versus 36,000 for seasonal flu, you can see how much more contagious the COVID is and how much more dangerous it really is if you take a look just at those numbers.
Yeah.
So
the only other thing I was thinking about this, about the COVID is, I kind of wonder, and this is my fault for not looking into it, being a guy who's a history buff, is because the 1918 pandemic, from everything I can remember and I've recently heard, in the summertime, it was, it was very, it was like COVID is now. And then later in the year, it came back and just became this nasty, massive flu and started killing people left and right. What did they do different from now? Because as a guy who has to work, I cannot just hide in my house. So that was my main question is, what do you think people did? My assumption is they all worked. And if they did that, what would have been the positive sides if they physically could just hide out for months? Because 1918, that's the end of World War I.
So the 1918-1919 flu killed more people than the Great War known today as World War One.
Yeah.
So more people died in a year from the swine flu in 1918 than all the people that were killed, all the men and women and children that were killed in World War One.
Yeah. So my question is, if they were able to do kind of what we did in the first couple of months of this, and people were laid off, government support, because don't forget, this is before a lot of the New Deal programs. This is a lot, this is way before actually all of those. And there wasn't really a government safety net. If there was such a thing, would the same thing happen? Because I'm having a hard time comparing the two, because straight out how deadly it is. The virus literally burned itself out. And last time I heard, and this was a long ass time ago, they don't have any viable strains of the 1918 pandemic flu to even to make some sort of antiviral agent for it.
Okay, if you say so, I would believe that there are government laboratories that definitely have copies of the swine flu.
It could be one of that particular
1918 particular virus. Yeah, I bet they do.
It could. Well, the last time I heard they didn't. But on the other hand, it could be one of those things that they're don't want.
Tell you they do. They're going to say, "Hey, we've got it. What a great way to weaponize something."
Well, that's what I'm going to say.
Right?
It could be one of these things, plausible deniability.
Yeah.
Like they say that they have that they have these diseases they've eliminated, but they've admitted to it because there's been a lot of stuff to get rid of, like polio, for example, and smallpox, and
right. Well, that's vaccines have been the reason why we've been able to get rid of smallpox and tuberculosis and all the diseases that killed so many people before we got to the point. And that's why I have such a hard time with the anti-vaxxers. I mean, if you don't want to look at the science, look at the numbers. I mean, it's just incredible how much vaccinating people have saved.
Yeah.
So.
But I also understand the anti-vaxxers' point of worrying about it, because when you heard that there's mercury in some of these,
there's nothing side effect free. All right.
Well,
so whatever you do, there's a risk level, right?
Well, yes, but no, I don't disagree. But I don't blame some of these anti-vaxxers for wanting to know what else they're dealing with, because I do know somebody whose kid was heavily affected badly by a vaccine. So I don't blame them for wanting to know. So, because as a parent, you have to balance out what's best for the kid. So I don't blame them for asking, because I'd want to know. I mean, hell, I'm pro Prop 65, and I routinely take pictures of Prop 65 stuff. I recently took one in it's kind of a catch-all department store, sells clothes, cooking, etc. And right on top of where they have all the pots and pans, there's a Prop 65 warning. I've seen it on makeup, women's underwear, sunglasses, coffee shops. And Prop 65, if you don't know about it, in the state of California, basically stating that the ingredients in said area or product may contain cancer-causing chemicals, etc.
Yeah.
And so
I've had a lot of people outside of California ask me, what is with the California cancer? Because that's what they call it. They call it, when they see it in other states, they're just like, so it only causes cancer in California.
Well, Prop 65 also is covering lead.
Yeah,
that's the main component in Prop 65. So, yes, there's a possibility of there being a certain amount of lead in everything.
and asbestos,
especially in certain parts of California. Yes. Yeah. When I bought my first house, there was maybe in my current house, there were multi-page documents of. This area has been known to contain asbestos, naturally occurring asbestos. That basically saying if you dig it up, it's your ass type of thing.
Well, that's the thing. California has asbestos everywhere. I mean, that's one of the. What building is it? Is it the Court C building in Possible that has that big chunk of asbestos under that glass case?
Probably.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
But yeah, I mean, it grows. It's naturally occurring around here. I shouldn't say it grows, but it
is naturally. You got it. It's naturally occurring around here. Yeah, in our area, we have a lot of areas in the serpentine rock that's in this area that has asbestos in it. I mean, it's part and parcel.
Yeah.
So I'm all for knowing what's in stuff. I mean, I think as a parent, it's your right to know what you're putting into your children and yourself. Now, I may not understand the extent that some of these anti-vaxxers go.
Well, you know, I think,
so the thing is that a lot of these anti-vaxxers, one of the things they bring up is, and it's scientifically proven that if you kill a certain bacteria or parasite or organism multiple times at the same way, it's going to basically evolve into a different strain that is resistant to that. So if you take a certain amount of the virus, whatever you're trying to kill, and you sit there and you put it in billions of our population, that little tiny percent that isn't fully dead, because that's the vaccine, is the actual virus, and not all of it is dead, can evolve into a more vaccine or resistant strain, which is what became SARS and the bird flu and possibly now COVID as well. So that's one of the things they complain about, is that. But
okay, so
I mean, that's going to happen regardless.
my understanding, and not being a doctor, I probably have this wrong, but my understanding is for most of what you're really talking about are more bacteria-strained viruses, or not viruses, but bacterias.
And antibiotics.
And the whole reason why we don't want to be taking antibiotics all the time is because it's becoming less and less effective.
Yeah.
So that's with bacteria. Now, influenzas, they do change in a little way.
Because
they mutate.
Because they're saying COVID is mutated.
They're saying that there's some different strains of COVID now out there, that it has mutated. So that hence may be part of the problem with also, you know, trying to get a vaccine that's going to be effective for every strain. It's the same problem that you have with getting a seasonal flu shot. I mean, they take a wag as to, okay, what seasonal flu may pop up this year, and this is what we're going to put into the seasonal flu strain. So the other thing a lot of people understand also with vaccines for influenzas is that the vaccine doesn't stay, the shot that you get doesn't stay with you at that full strength very long. It's about 3 months at the high level, and then it keeps degrading all the way through. So after a year, you would more than likely not have any antibodies.
So it's like tetanus. You got to get a booster every once in a while.
Some kind of idea, I assume, but influenzas are particularly worse with that. That's why you have to get a shot every year, because it just doesn't stay with you.
And that's the one thing I've heard, and I don't want to talk about COVID for too long because it's kind of a depressing subject. That's the one thing I heard of COVID, is they're trying to figure out how long does it actually last for, the antibodies. And I'm just going to have a quick subject change before giving it to Rob. I see he has something he wanted to talk about. I recently, and I don't believe I did this, Paris Hilton has a YouTube original documentary, and it's actually super interesting because it talks about how the Paris Hilton you saw in the media is a complete act. It is incredibly interesting actually listening to at least what apparently is the real person behind the brand Paris Hilton. So I check it out. It's YouTube original. It's if you got a quick bit to watch, it's like an hour plus. It's I find it fascinating.
So it talks about her life and that.
Yeah, it talks about her life.
An hour of Paris Hilton.
Well, see, the interesting thing, it talks about the rise of Paris Hilton with a sex tape. It talks about how she, I guess, was kind of a party girl and got sent to Provo, Utah, in the school there, and the massive amount of abuse. Like, literally, these people kidnapped her in the middle of the night and did all sorts of horrible stuff to her. Not sexually, but pretty bad.
Excuse me.
And talks about her going over that and the trust issues it caused. It talks about her dating life. Like, every time she dates ends a relationship, she buys a new MacBook. And she had this stack of MacBooks, and some of them were like bent sideways and dings because I guess boyfriends had a tendency to grab one and fling them. And I don't know why you would grab somebody's laptop and fling them. And it's just
they're assholes,
right?
She dates assholes.
Yeah. And it's just super interesting to see that. And then you get to see from her sister's side and her mom's side. And it's just a super interesting documentary, because I remember when she was rising to fame, and she had this very vacuous personality, like everybody thought, oh, the smartest thing about her is when she leaves a room. But turns out she seems to be incredibly intelligent if she's able to maintain that brand without nobody really knowing her.
Yeah, good for her. Not being Paris Hilton, we're going to talk about something kind of sad, but yet interesting to watch what happens.
Oh, great. More sadder than COVID?
Yeah, well, for me anyway. So Remington has finally finished bankruptcy. The courts have finally said that Remington Arms Company is now has to or will not escape the latest bankruptcy filing act that was placed against them. And so they're going to be broken up into multiple parts. And so from my sources, it looks like Ruger is going to take now. So many of you probably don't know, Remington was more than just Remington Arms. It's Remington and Ammunition. They owned a number of different companies, including Marlin Firearms and Remington.
I didn't know they were part of Marlin.
Yeah. So Ruger is going to take over Marlin. That's kind of an interesting purchase. I thought Ruger and Marlin, there might be a fit there somewhere. I'm not sure where. Maybe in the I'm not sure where Ruger's going to fit in with Marlin. It's going to bring in a lot of different lines into Ruger, and that might be good.
Well, that's probably what they need, is a little bit more diversification.
And I think that's why they're going to do it, yeah. And I think Ruger's quality control may be a little bit better at this point, because towards the end there, Remington was slipping pretty bad with that on Marlin. Vista Outdoors gets to get the Lone Oak ammunition part. That's Sarah Bullets and control of Barnes, which is a big deal. That's a multi-million dollar deal in itself, with Remington Ammunition. Apparently the line will stay with the name, but it's going to be controlled different. And we don't know what's going to happen as far as the bullets and primers and other stuff that they made as well. Bushmaster, which many people didn't know that Remington also owned, because it's going to go to Franklin Armory Holdings. So there goes the Bushmaster part over onto that side. We'll see what they do with that. Not a big fan of a whole lot of Bushmaster stuff, but a lot of people love it.
Huh.
So, but anyway, yeah, it's kind of an end of the era.
So I was looking.
It was the nation's oldest gun maker.
But I'm looking this over, but it's not the same company. Was trying to figure out, because I remember hearing something about they went bankrupt at some point.
It wasn't Remington Arms Company per se. That was the name of what they worked under. It was a holding company.
So until 2015, Remington Arms was part of the Freedom Group, which was owned and operated by Sybaris Capital Management in 2014. I'm curious in the research, like, when did it get? Oh, here we go. On March 7th, 1888, ownership of E. Remington & Sons was sold by Remington family to two owners, a Marcellus Hartley and Partners. So pretty much the family sold out of the company in 1888.
Oh, yeah. They've been long gone out
so
of it.
That's what I was trying to figure out, is where's the actual lineage of the company. So basically...
Yeah, it has not been a family-owned company, such like Ruger.
Yeah.
But the Remington is, of course, much older. And so, yeah, the family was gone a long time ago on that part. So, but it's everything changes. So here we are. And for those of you that have been trying to purchase, since this is September of 2020, purchase ammunition and firearms all over the country, it's been a incredible period of time of people panicking and hoarding. Ammunition itself, plus if you're into reloading components, powders, primers, bullets, extremely scarce and trying to get anything.
You think they'd be making money on ammunition alone?
It's just they can't keep up with the demand. The demand has skyrocketed, and it's interesting how it's getting worse and worse as the closer and closer we get to the presidential elections. I find this very interesting. there are some people that are freaking out about it.
Well, I mean, if you want to go down the rabbit hole a little bit, with this particular election, I think there's a little bit more valid concern over previous elections, and that's solely based, in my opinion, based on previous who's running and
So,
previous histories, etc.
Federal law enforcement, whichever alphabet soup you want to go down with or whatever, are saying that they're expecting civil unrest no matter who wins the election.
There was a guy, you talked about that. There was a guy who actually predicted in the next so many years, by like 2030. I got to find the article if I can find it. Basically said America's going to have another civil war in the next so many years.
Yeah, I heard that.
We've become so... Yeah, I don't understand how we're walking so far away from the Constitution and how our current Supreme Court isn't stepping up to take on some of the cases that would maybe help with some of the friction that we have going on within this country, and they're just refusing to hear them. And I personally, I'm a bit confused on the whole thing. I'm going, I think there's some ways that we could be dealing with the civil situation that we're dealing with now better, and maybe. So all right. So it comes down to disenfranchised citizens or voters, any way you look at it. Maybe both, right? So we've got people on all sides that are saying, I don't have a horse in this race, simply because we're having to settle for whatever we currently have, because we believe what we currently have might continue to support the opinion we have now, and then the other party that's trying to get in power saying, no, we need to do things in a different way, in a different manner. And you're literally getting people in the country that just go, none of this really applies to me. And it gets back to the old question of the Electoral College. People don't understand why we have the Electoral College. I know a person that personally has 2 PhDs that simply does not understand the difference between the Electoral College and the majority vote.
See, I think it's a little bit more simpler than that.
Simpler?
No,
Can't get much simpler than that.
Well, no, I see. I think it's a different way. I don't think it's a constitutional. People don't get it. I think it's a societal issue, and I really do think it's. And some people think I'm crazy for thinking this. I think what it is we're becoming a more secular society, and for America, who was basically a very religious society up until recently, when like the last 100 years, we all had some sort of mutual understanding. Like there's a pastor I once heard that said, when you wanted to bring up concepts, you'd have to bring in, like for certain things, you'd bring in a biblical concept to explain a secular concept. He said, nowadays in church, you bring up a secular concept to explain a biblical concept. So basically what I'm trying to say is I think what it is we have opposing worldviews, and people are all trying to find their group. I've always said we should all unite under one banner. We're all Americans, Christian American, Black Americans, gay Americans, we're all Americans. And this friend of mine comments like, no, it has been proven to be healthy that you're a gay, transsexual, something Black American, and you need this. Like, you have to identify yourself by all these little groups instead of being, you're all of that, but under the American banner. And I think that's what it is. I think it's a societal breakdown of where we identify, because now we're so deep in that rabbit hole that the conservatives and the liberals have such an competing worldview that it's now coming to a head, because the worldviews are completely different now on one side or another. From the extreme points, it's 100% true. So I think it's a worldview issue. Worldview on freedoms, worldview on governments, worldview on religion, worldview on personhood, and etc.
Well, so this is speak for the fact that the average human being in this world is more enlightened than they were 100 years ago? More educated?
I've met plenty of educated people that can't change a tire.
Well, don't get me started about shop classes.
Well, no. Basically, what I'm saying is, I think what we need to do is what is education? What do you considered?
Well, that's why I call the term enlightened, because enlightened is, more aware of your surroundings, what's going on, more aware of what your country is all about, and what's going on with the world in your country. So, are people more enlightened? And this is why. That they're all going now, well, hey, in the United States, they can be whatever they want to be. They can be whatever gender they want to be. They can be whatever name, pronoun, whatever it is they want, they can. And here we are sitting here, and we're repressed. And so maybe there's an issue in other worlds, and why there's all these other countries, of course, that they don't want that information getting over to their citizens, because they don't want them sitting there knocking on their doors trying to answer the questions. So, where are you going with that?
Well, see, so looking up on the dictionary, there's two.
Oh, not that doggone dictionary.
So there's two.
Which version?
So this is whatever Apple uses. So it's not the 1865, which I know people who prefer the old dictionary, but there's
it's the Urban Dictionary?
This is the Onion Dictionary.
You want me to look up Dirty Sanchez? So number two on the number 2 is the one I'm looking at. It says Enlightenment is a European intellectual movement of the late 17th and 18th centuries that emphasized reason and individualism rather than tradition. It was heavily influenced by the 17th century philosophers such as Descartes, Locke, Newton, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
I see, the only thing I don't quite understand it, because it's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I definitely agree that I definitely believe it's a worldview issue, but I don't think it's lack of choices, because I'm 100% for people, whether I agree with it or not, people doing whatever they want. It's their lives. You live the life. As long as you're not violating my right, you can do whatever you want. I don't care. But I don't know. I really don't understand what is happening. And I've spent considerable amount of time reflecting on talking to people who I know who are practically fucking communist, to people who are the most conservative people I've ever met, and nobody seems to have a right answer. Or at least an answer that makes sense.
Why would you expect somebody to have a right answer? What do you consider the right answer?
Yeah.
Well, the right answer to me would be something that... So this is what it is. So somebody gives me an answer, I'd be sitting down and reflecting on it and going, okay, this makes sense. This fits in within the narrative I'm seeing.
This makes sense to you.
Yeah, well, yes, because if it makes sense to me...
That's all that matters to Jonathan. It's his world.
Well, no, but if it makes sense to me, then I can explain it to somebody else. And if I say this is what it's the conversation. It's all broad brushstrokes, but...
I'm not 100% certain what that had to do with the fact that I was talking about our Constitution in our country, but
because I think
I'm trying to focus on what just affects us. What's going over in China right now, other than the flu?
Well, because I think this does affect us. I think the reason why people don't understand the basics of the Constitution, why what you were talking about, the Electoral College is important to individual states, happens to be because it's the lack of uniting under a common banner, and the reason why is because of blank.
It's okay, and the reason why simply has to do with population bases in this country. And that's the reason we have the Electoral College. Because otherwise, us sitting here, and we already have this problem in California, because where we sit in California has absolutely no effect on the way the votes go in this state. And it's the same thing for many other states in the middle of this country that does not have the population bases that New York City has, that Los Angeles has, that San Francisco has, that all the high population concentrated areas that we get most of our news from and most of the talking heads from. And the rest of the country could literally just stay home and not vote and wouldn't change a doggone thing if it wasn't for the Electoral College.
Well, if we didn't have the Electoral College, California would vote for the entire West Coast into at least 4 or 5 states in.
Oh, well,
Actually,
California, Oregon, and Washington would control almost half of the United States alone.
yeah.
So,
but that goes back to, I think, my argument of, and your comment about the Enlightenment, because this was something that our founders realized that everybody has to have a voice. And I think that the cultural issue is which making everybody say, no, your voice isn't important because you're this and you're not that. I think what it is we've come to a point where individualism is so important that the natural flow of what makes America great doesn't work. Like when our forefathers came here for a better life, they realized, hey, I can work my ass off, but I can do good. Now that's no longer there. That's no longer an option because, oh, I'm not this or I'm not that. I think what it is people are searching for an identity, and I think that's affecting the country because people no longer know who they are.
You don't know who you are?
I mean, if you think about it, by nature, people go for somebody who is similar to them. Jews lived in the Jewish area, Czechs lived in the Czech area, etc. And I think what it is people are so polarized that the benefits of the electoral college, the benefit of the system, I mean, it's not perfect. But I think the people don't understand the benefits of the system because they're looking for their own identity. It's a little bit of a stretch, but I do think this is what's affecting it. Because I first noticed it when I was a kid. And I remember hearing stuff that, oh, this community and that community. And I remember thinking, well, we're all Americans. Why are they so divided? Not realizing, okay, for the black and the white community, there's a history of injustice. There's a history of this. But then, I don't want to get too down the rabbit hole on that, but
so I'm going to step way back and take a further look at it, and let's look at the immigration to United States. Why did many, not all, but I would bet the majority of people, why did they immigrate here? It was to flee the tyranny that they were living in their own home countries,
and a chance to do better,
right? So they fled and they came over here to the United States. And we still have pockets in the larger city areas you have the Italian area, you have the Asian area, the Jewish area, you have we still have that. That still exists, not in the majority of the country, but in pockets throughout the country that still exists.
like San Francisco has Chinatown.
Well, so does New York City.
Yeah,
and
they have, like the little Tokyo.
Little Italy.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that still goes on to today, and that's all right. Doesn't make them not Americans. It makes them want to have some identity with their ethnic group that they came over to this country, that they were repressed from in their home countries, and why they came here. My problem always is that, okay, so you're coming to another country, you're fleeing your country for a particular reason, you're coming over to this country, you get here, and then you say, hey, no, we want to do it like we used to do at the home country. And I have a problem with that. I mean, the whole reason you fled was to flee the tyranny and the non-choices that you probably had, and you're trying to flee and get a better life, and yet now you want to change something to be like it was where you were at. Doesn't make sense to me. That's why I know for our grandparents, our great-great-grandparents that came over here, they didn't want to talk the home tongue anymore. They didn't, want to talk about what was there. They were going to be Americans. And you came here, you learned English. You came here, you became part of a big country and part of what America was all about. We've lost that.
We have.
Yeah.
But because our forefathers, they were whatever, but became Americans. I think that's the thing, is they became Americans. What was it? E pluribus unum, through many one.
Well, so yeah, absolutely. And, I don't know what the naturalization rate is now, but there's still millions of people that come here who want to be Americans and want what we have. And yet we've got all these Americans that are unhappy about what we have, and they want to change that.
Well,
and it's very confusing for many of the the people that are immigrating here or trying to make a life here. They're going, I don't get it.
It's the first world problem because Starbucks is out of my favorite latte. I mean, it's my life is so hard because I can't have blank. And usually blank is this small, minute, really unimportant in the small ideal of things. I've always I believe lately that when you don't have big shit to worry about, little shit becomes annoyingly fucking important. Like, oh, my life is so easy because I've got a car, I've got a roof, I've got food. So now my car got scratched. That becomes the thing that blows up your world because you have this insignificant problem. And I think that's the issue.
I think I'd rather have the insignificant problems than the big ones,
100%.
right?
But I think we're so myopic about that. I think we're all Mr. Magoo so much that I don't think we can step back and see the forest through the trees.
You expect people to know who Mr. Magoo is?
I already use ancient references. If they don't know what it is, they can. Ancient
comic references.
Yeah.
I used to have all the stuff on VHS. Mr. Magoo.
Well, if they don't want to look up my favorite my video home system, the latest and greatest of home entertainment.
Yes.
Watch movies
tape.
at home.
Put everything on this magnetic tape. It's all coming back. But as old as new again.
Hey, it's coming back. I hope not. I don't know. I just think that's the biggest issue, and I actually think Ryan would agree with this. Is
no,
Ryan has to be here to agree with things.
I think he would. It's like when there's no big problems to worry about. Everybody worries about little problems.
And you know what? I think that's just the way it is. You're absolutely right. I mean, your biggest worrying point is whatever the next thing is on the horizon for you for a worrying point.
Yeah, and like art. I think James's forefathers and our forefathers would have realized it's like, dude, I haven't eaten in 4 days, and you're worried about fucking coffee, I think that's the issue, is the fact I think we're a little too myopic. I don't think we reflect enough, and I think that's the problem.
Okay, so reflecting, it's interesting that you said that, because one of the things that I've been reflecting, since we're on reflecting, and Wayback Machine may go back on this one. But
Sherman set the Wayback Machine in 1965.
I understand the BLM situation. I think I've educated myself enough on it, and I truly understand where these people are coming from. Yeah. But go back in history just a little bit, and you find that people of all races and creeds, whatever it may be to a degree, have all been discriminated against in one way, shape, or form. You look back into the times of the Romans. They seemed to like to enslave anybody that they conquered. It didn't matter what you were, what color you were. You got to remember, they had a big love affair with Egypt for a long time. They didn't care about that, but they enslaved an awful lot of them. Jews have historically been enslaved.
They've been everybody's target in today.
Everybody's target into the. I'll look at Hitler did. So I mean,
look at Europe now.
Well,
there's a huge rise in anti-Semitism.
Yeah, I don't know. So I understand. I can totally sympathize with BLM being of Jewish descent. Understanding that just because of where we came from or who our parents chose to marry or whatever it may be, you're going to be discriminated against. And so I can certainly look at it and understand it. Answer me this, though. What do you think about reparations?
So I've got a particular family member of mine extremely angry at me years ago. So I'm going to be very careful with this and just say this is
not the show for that. We're supposed to lay it out here and let's go at what do you think?
So my opinion of this has always been, if you find somebody who is a slave or whose life has been
who was a slave
or whose life has been seriously affected by racism, I'm okay with that. But the first thing is, if you find a slave, the motherfucker's 200 years old, give him money.
So shouldn't the biggest form then, if we're here in this wonderful United States of America, one of the largest countries in the world, and there were people on it before we even started our first encampment or pulled up a Plymouth Rock or whatever it may be called.
That's going to be next.
That we talk Native Americans, and should they not be the ones that should be out there talking about reparations?
There's already talk about that on social media. The only problem, and this is going to sound really bad, I don't mean to sound as bad as it is, they just don't have as good a PR. Because I've seen that in a couple of places regarding.
We have segregated them so badly. That's the problem, right? We rounded them up and stuck them on these reservations, and that's kind of where they're at. They haven't dispersed in any large quantities throughout the country. I think that's part of their issues as well.
The only thing I can say on that, and I've said this for a long time, is changing people's attitudes regarding things takes a long time. And I still think regarding racism, if you compare...
How about when we recognize it for what it was?
No, I agree.
What it is. And we go, okay, it was egregious. Should have never happened. It was the way it was back then. I mean, wars and killing and tribal stuff has been going on since man walked this earth. They're proving it started even before Homo sapien. That, we always fought each other.
Yeah,
always.
And what I was saying was, if you take a look from the Emancipation Proclamation took place to modern times, an amazing amount as far as the African American racism, amazing amount of stuff has been done. We've changed. There has been a huge shift in momentum. It went from racism was okay to no, hold on there.
Absolutely.
Is it perfect? No. If you also take a look at homosexuality, it went from, in a matter of a decade, went from being a no-no to accepted. Human history, that's incredibly fucking fast. So all I'm saying is I agree.
I know a number of gay Americans that would probably argue with you about it changed in a decade.
Well, no, you're right. But I mean, if you compare from when it been from completely culturally unacceptable to acceptable, to that's fast. I mean, the reality thinking, that's incredibly fast. If you think about it, from no to yes, that didn't happen. Like, if you came as far as Emancipation Proclamation, like 10 years. And if you got a lot of groups who are more acceptable, is it perfect? No, but
so that was our catchphrase of the day: enlightenment. That's what I was talking about. The fact is that the information is getting there more. People are being enlightened quicker, faster, in more ways than we ever have before, and that's why I think things culturally can change so quickly.
I don't believe I'm about to quote my cousin on this. Enlightenment is a double-edged sword. Oh, that hurt. I think...
I want to wash your mouth out.
Seriously. Anybody got any mercurochrome I can gargle? Well, I think the issue is I think you can be too enlightened, or maybe enlightened the wrong way. I think there's a problem with that, but I can't put my finger on it or in it, but I think that's the issue there is I think maybe enlightenment can go too far.
How can knowledge go too far?
Because if your brain and your feet don't go together, you're going to sit and spin for a while. And I think that's what it takes. I think it takes knowledge and action. I mean, I'm explaining myself poorly.
That's unusual.
So I don't think the situation is that I don't think anything's going to change as far as that goes. I think, if anything, the speed of knowledge and light is going to be even quicker. And one of the things that one of the things that's taking place during this particular election cycle that we're looking at right now is also the fact that they're talking about fake news, fake information, wrong information, whatever it may be. And you see it almost daily. I mean, CNN talking about Fox, talking about whatever it may be. Nobody's got the right story. And it seems
nobody cares.
Yeah.
Well, and
They don't care to report the right story anymore.
They only, well, I guess that's right. I guess they look at their demographics of what the people must be watching them and they say, hey, we've got to point the news towards this point of view.
Modern yellow
because
journalism.
That's who's watching us.
Modern yellow journalism. If it bleeds, it leads.
It's just, I'm just watching this whole thing up to this election and all the stuff that's going down, and it's just a mind blower. I mean, you know, we've got a woman who's being nominated to be on the United States Supreme Court, who you have the Speaker of the House coming and saying we can't. Well, of course, she's being in the House, Speaker of the House being in the House. She doesn't have a voice in the matter, but saying that, you know, she's going to send DACA back, and you know, we're not going to have that, and people aren't going to have medical insurance, and everything's going to go back because of her religion.
But I
thought we were enlightened.
But I read an article yesterday that she said we cannot. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, said we cannot talk about our Catholic faith. That would be improper.
But that's the whole reason they're pointing to the change in possibly Roe versus Wade. And the whole reason why they don't want her is because of her religion. Even
she said, the lady said that she doesn't think it would be possible to overturn Roe v. Wade. I think so. I heard something interesting. And
I hope it's not, because I believe that's my opinion. But on the religious side, when they look at it for a religious side, but particularly the Catholic religion, that's an absolute no-no.
Well, this particular judge, I heard a little bit of an interview with her. She said you cannot, when judging, you have to judge by the law and not by your personal intentions.
But this is Supreme Court, so this is interpretation of the Constitution. They have to look at things completely different than a Superior Court judge sitting there making a judgment on a drug addict. Totally different. Totally different.
So I heard something, and we're coming up to the end of the program. I did hear something that this reminded me of, is when when the press came along. Like, was it the Gutenberg press?
Yes.
When that came around, there's a lot of leaflets and false information that happened, and it took a while for people to call bullshit on bullshit. And
misinformation has been out there from.
I think the difference
telling stories.
I think the difference now is the speed. I think the newer generation might be hopefully better at understanding what's bullshit, like not trusting. So maybe what it is the next generation, like James and our kids, maybe they're just going to not trust anything. So it's going to be harder to pass off the truth because you're going to have to be convincing that it is the truth.
So maybe we're going to see the possibility of, and this kind of goes back to some sci-fi and people looking into the future of thought police, idea police. No, sorry, that's wrong police. This could be leading into a whole avenue of now. Not only are you saying you can't think that way.
Well, wokevists, they're already there.
What?
Wokevists.
It's a term I heard today. I like. A lot of these overly woke people think that, you can't think this, you can't think that. Political correctness has always been that to a way. Beyond not calling a black person an N-word, it got really extreme. Oh, you're this, you're this. There's a joke about you can't call a prostitute a prostitute. She's a sexual maintenance partner. I think that was part of it. I think it's always been there.
Well, but I'm talking about actually almost at a state level now, because at what point do we call bullshit, right? I mean, so there, you look in this election, it's happening right now, and it's just like, who do you believe? What do you believe? It comes
I'm a conservative. I don't believe anybody.
Well, no, it's actually the opposite of what you're saying. I think if you're conservative, you have a firm belief in something.
No, I have ideals. I just don't trust. I don't believe what anybody's spouting.
Well, That's more because
I follow politics too closely.
I don't know. It's just because you are who you are.
I don't know any.
You have the right to be that way.
Well, I don't know. I don't know anybody who trusts.
I will stand up and allow you to say whatever it is you believe to say.
John's a hippie.
John's a hippie.
Right. I'm a hippie. Well, I'm more liberal than you, so I'm not quite sure.
You don't trust the government.
How does that make me a hippie? I figured it makes me intelligent.
No, you're a hippie.
Yeah, ask that to the people who in the Tuskegee experiment.
Down with the man.
Yeah, down with the man.
Down with the man.
However, I really like saying the word groovy because it really tweaks people off.
See, you're a hippie.
Why would it tweak people off? It's in the dictionary.
I've said groovy and trippy before, and some people just go.
Well, we're raised with parents that were
so I think
in that era, so you come by it naturally. How's that?
I don't know. It's gonna be interesting the next couple of years, no matter who wins. Because there's some benefits of both. I mean, if you can look at it objectively, even though it's really hard, incredibly difficult, actually.
So I wonder, looking at what we're in now, I'm looking back in my little bit of history and trying to figure out. So they talked about JFK and Nixon during the first election cycle when JFK got elected president. One of the things that took place during that period of time, and we may have talked about this before, had to do with Nixon was under these really hot lights, and he sweated a lot, where JFK didn't. And they were saying that ideas and opinions were changed just by that one interview alone, because of the way.
Yeah, I heard about that too.
Because of the way he looked, and so you start looking at misinformation or what kind of information. So you go back there. So the JFK side pounced on that like crazy and brought that up, going, "Look, this man's sweating. He's hot. He can't be telling the truth." And it was a very interesting. You start reading this stuff about what took place even in my short period of time. I was way too young to remember that, so I wouldn't know. But still, it was very interesting to think that something as simple as one debate, because one man was sweating and the other wasn't, was enough to turn the tide towards him. And you have to remember at the time, JFK, being Catholic, was to many people was like, oh my God, the world's coming to the end because we're electing a Catholic president. So it's very interesting to see where we've come, but to look back at our past, and as many of our history teachers would probably have told you, is that look at the past to see what the future may bring.
Yeah. Well, not very many teachers teach that these days, honestly.
That's a good slogan. I should put that on a bumper sticker.
That's an awfully long slogan.
Look at the past to see what your future may bring.
Yeah, you're going to have to shorten it a little bit.
Yeah, well, anyway. I thought I'd leave that one ringing statement to wrap up the show.
Wait, can you say that again, but add Confucius say?
No, Confucius didn't say that, but he may have said something similar. Probably shorter, too. We'll have to look. Wrap it up, John. Let's go.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, to quote Bill S. Teston and Fred Theodore and Fled, screw it, and Ted.
Let's ruin the ending
whatever.
Of the show.
I had a perfect ending. It's like, be excellent to one another.
Well, obviously you didn't.
Oh,
and
no.
Ladies and gentlemen,
are we actually doing that? Wait a minute. Stop. What did you say? Be excellent to each other. Do you realize the new thing that's going on in the media today is that every one of these talking heads is ending up with something that's like, be kind to your neighbor. Be nice to what you say. So you just fit right into it. That wrapped it up, folks. Thanks.
Oh, I can go, well, that was one.
You did.
I'm going to switch it up. It's like, well, that was one hell of a clusterfuck. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, for the California Pariah, Jonathan Charney, James, the Fat Man Stevens, Rob, the old guy. We're all doomed. See you next week.
Bye.
Goodbye.